Well, finally, the White House has stopped beating around the bush and has directly stated what Trump wants to achieve at his meeting with Putin in Alaska on August 15th. Ukraine is receiving increasingly troubling signals. Today, United States Vice President J.D. Vance stated that neither Ukraine nor Russia will be satisfied with such a peace agreement, but it is Ukraine that will have to make more concessions. At the same time, Vance stated that the United States is working on organizing a meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian balding dictator Vladimir Putin with the goal of ending Russia's war against Ukraine. But Senator Lindsey Graham made a rather strange statement on this matter. According to him, Ukraine will not be able to drive the Russians out of all its territory, but Russia is also unable to capture any new significant territories. Therefore, a peace agreement will be considered. There's an interesting wording here, we'll discuss it. Well, and this position is a bit reminiscent of Trump's earlier rhetoric, who insisted that Russia also can't be left without the occupied territories of Ukraine. You see, so many of these Russian occupiers have died, and that's supposedly the price for this land. He says, how can we leave them without Ukrainian land? Those unwashed Russians died there after all. Well, so probably if they died, then something should be given to them. So let's figure out what exactly Russia is trying to push on us right now. And Donald Trump? My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is August 11th. Let's go through everything step by step. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, write any comment, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link is in this video's description. So, in the United States, they consider a key point in ending Russia's war against Ukraine to be an agreement based on the current line of contact. This was stated by United States Vice President J.D. Vance. And here's his quote. What will come of this? In fact, it's very simple. If you take into account the current line of contact between Russia and Ukraine, we will try to find some kind of negotiated settlement that Ukrainians and Russians can live with, where they can live in relative peace, where the killing will stop. At the same time, Vance admitted that it is unlikely the terms of peace will make both Ukraine and the Russian Federation happy. It's a strange way to put it, but nevertheless, he says both sides will be dissatisfied with such a peace agreement. Quote, the terms of the peace agreement won't make anyone too happy. Both Russians and Ukrainians will likely end up dissatisfied. J.D. Vance still needs to. As Zelensky told him in February, he should visit Ukraine to see what's happening. What will Russians be dissatisfied with? That they took part of another country and killed thousands of civilians? That's what they'll be dissatisfied with. You are essentially rewarding the aggressor and occupier for his war. You say, well, you didn't succeed? Well, Putin wanted to capture all of Ukraine, but he failed. The Ukrainians fought back. He managed to seize the piece that he could, and J.D. Vance says, well, we'll let them keep that. Of course, Putin won't be satisfied that he couldn't capture all of Ukraine, but what can you do? So, let them at least take this. That's a reward for the aggressor. And, it's just a paradoxical situation where the United States suddenly cares about whether a savage aggressor who invaded a neighboring country and killed hundreds and thousands of Ukrainians with impunity will be satisfied with a peace agreement. And when Putin seized Crimea, the United States forgave him for it. What did he do? He started the war in Donbass. Even when that was forgiven and freezing the front line was suggested, what did Putin do? He launched a war against Ukraine. Now in the United States, they're once again suggesting just forgiving Putin, and they're even worried about whether it will happen at all. Satisfied? Well, excuse my language. Senator Lindsey Graham also changed his stance in this situation, now stating that Ukraine won't be able to drive the Russians out of all its territory. Russia is also unable to seize any major new territory. Therefore, he says, a peace agreement will involve a certain format of mutual territorial concessions. At the same time, he referred to the history of Germany's division after World War II, when even the city of Berlin existed in a divided state for more than 30 years. By the way, the journalist reminded Lindsey Graham of his own statement from 2023, in which he said that wars should not be ended by giving territory to aggressors. Conceding to Russia in Ukraine would encourage the Kremlin to launch more wars, even against NATO. The journalist asks, Lindsey Graham, these are your 2023 words. What changed? To this, Graham replied that continuing military aid to Ukraine would guarantee peace in Europe, because in that scenario, quote, Russia would be contained by the deadliest army on the European continent, meaning Ukraine. According to him, security guarantees should also mean that if Russia invades Ukraine again, they will face not only the Ukrainian army, but also European forces on the ground. In addition, Frem is convinced that the agreement on minerals or the agreement on rare earth metals between Kyiv and Washington will also somehow guarantee Ukraine's security. Because, quote, President Trump will protect these interests. When Frem was asked, listen, how does this agreement guarantee security? Frem couldn't answer. He said, well, somehow maybe it will guarantee it. Previously, Ukrainian President Zelensky stated Ukraine would not voluntarily surrender its land. There are currently several plans circulating in the media according to which the United States will support the complete transfer to Russia. In the Donetsk and Luhansk regions and in the Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions, a ceasefire should be implemented along the current front line. This basically means the Ukrainian armed forces should just give up their positions to the occupiers. Next. The permanent representative of the United States to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, also stated that most likely, as part of a ceasefire agreement, Ukraine and Russia will have to exchange territories. But in fact, he already added an interesting phrase, quote, no large pieces or areas, territories that were not fought for or earned on the battlefield will simply be given away. It's still a strange wording, but nevertheless, it's a hint that nothing will simply be given to Putin. In addition, Whitaker, answering a question about whether the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, could join the meeting between Trump and Putin in Alaska, said that it is quite possible. But that's up to JD. Vance adds that the United States is working on organizing a meeting between Ukrainian President Zelensky and Russian dictator Putin with the goal of ending Russia's war against Ukraine. Quote, the United States is in the process of coordinating a time when they can meet and discuss ending the war. We are now planning for Zelensky, Trump, and Putin to meet and discuss ending the war in Ukraine. The United States President's administration is maintaining a dialogue with Ukraine and Zelensky. The United States is striving to end the war in Ukraine along the current line of contact. We will try to find some kind of agreed solution that both Ukrainians and Russians can live with. Jurist Dr. Vance then makes a statement that directly contradicts Lindsey Graham's earlier claim that Ukraine needs security guarantees. After signing such a peace agreement, military aid to Ukraine will continue in order to maintain the strongest army in Europe. So, jurist Dr. Vance, on the contrary, said directly that the United States will be winding down military aid to Ukraine because they want to achieve a peaceful settlement. There are the main contradictions. No matter what Lindsey Graham says, the United States Vice President is saying that no, there will be no further military aid. But the main risk for Ukraine is that Trump has broken a long-standing United States principle. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began, the United States has maintained its policy of no talks about Ukraine without Ukraine. Now, however, the United States President is planning to meet with the Russian dictator, where Ukrainians will not be present. And Trump's statement about negotiations with the Russian side and about exchanging territories between Ukraine and Russia, including Russia and Ukraine, to be continued. And the denial of this by Zelensky and the Europeans only highlights the enormous risks for Ukrainians. There is a possibility that Trump and Putin will try to develop a peace agreement, the terms of which will not take Ukraine's interests into account. Trump might prove to be not just an unreliable partner for Ukraine. Moreover, Trump is susceptible to flattery and manipulation from Putin, which could influence his position on the Russia-Ukraine war. In addition, Trump. But there are also significant political risks for Trump from meeting with Putin in Alaska, because the Russian dictator might see this move as a concession from the United States. And now I'll quote the New York Times. President Trump still seems to approach these negotiations as if Putin is conducting them as a partner or a friend. This will complicate negotiations, especially if Ukraine isn't included. The very meeting between Trump and Putin is a small victory for the Russian dictator. The head of the Russian Federation will try to use this even after the meeting. Putin's visit to American territory will mean the end of his political and legal isolation. Moreover, earlier the United States President stopped the efforts of the Department of Justice and the State Department to collect evidence of war crimes committed by Russia during the invasion of Ukraine. But there is also a rather frightening explanation, for Trump's haste. Because the very Nobel Peace Prize that he so desperately wants to receive is awarded in early October. And by that time, Trump is rushing to sign any kind of peace agreement at all, just so he has a reason to receive this prize. I'll leave it at that. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe, hit the bell, and like the channel. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.